Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Really a delight, as usual, to be here. And it's fun this Wednesday drop-in because you never know who's going to turn up. And it's so wonderful to see some faces all the time, regular, and then some coming and going and some brand new. So just, taking you all in. And if it feels not creepy, you can take each other in a little. Because it's true, every single Wednesday, it's a little bit different of a constellation of folks who show up. And, it is such a huge offering of our time and our energy to be here together in practice. There are so many other ways that we could spend our time that might be more easily distracting, right? Or kind of nourishing at that sensory level of eating a great meal or seeing a great movie. But there's something so special about coming here and what a commitment that is to ourselves and to one another that I really admire and respect for all you choosing to be here. And it's continues to be a really great time for the Dharma, given the conditions of the world and what's going on. And it feels very poignant, this book, for those of you who haven't been here on one of these Wednesday nights. We're making our way through this 8th century text that's called The Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. It is a text that is often cited by many spiritual teachers because it has really simple, pithy teachings on how we cultivate the heart and how we clarify the mind so that we can ourselves feel fortified to be warriors of compassion and specifically to, walk in the world which is on fire. That's kind of the actual text. And that, of course, has a literal connotation these days with the devastation in the southern part of our state and also in, the difficulty of myriad changes throughout our country and the world. So that how do we not succumb to despair, overwhelm, blame, rage? A lot of this book is essentially becoming a bodhisattva, becoming this compassion warrior through a couple very specific methods. One is, the kind of way this book starts off, really cultivating and investing and kind of testing this idea that we actually are here for all others. That the best thing we can do in this human life is show up fully to be part of what's happening with everyone around us. And no problem. Come on in, shoes or otherwise. And I think that it's always good to kind of like restart with that invocation. So this term bodhicitta means the awakened heart. And this idea of bodhicitta that's presented so beautifully in the first 3 chapters of this book, it really details how we can find a sense of joy, contentment, and ease by at almost every moment turning our mind towards how can I help others? In anything we're doing, whether we're taking a sip of water, whether we're walking down the street, whether we're in conversation. Can I, in doing this activity, actually do this activity and have and hold in mind, how can this be of benefit to others? So this real kind of, infiltrating the mind stream with these values, with these ideas. And another, quintessential part of this teaching is how do we, as Shanti Deva, the author, puts, how do we tame the wild elephant of this mind? And it definitely feels like a wild elephant when you are trying to sit, find the silence, find the quiet, and you find that actually you have little to no control over the mind. It's going to do what it's going to do. And for many of us, this feels like some kind of failure, like I'm not doing it right. I'm here to meditate and there goes my mind and there goes my mind. But the whole key or the whole purpose is if you remember your intention which is to show up with this full heart and be part of this human experience, then every time you bring your mind back, you're strengthening in a meaningful way your attention, your capacity, and strengthening your commitment. It's so difficult to tame the mind. It's so difficult to kind of polish the inner lens so that we can see clearly into our own heart, into our own experience. And so why keep doing it? We need to have that ongoing motivation, that sense of bodhicitta, of why we're here. And a lot of the cultivation of bodhicitta, that heartfelt experience, luckily, it has an upstream and a downstream effect. If we believe that all beings of all time are worthy of a sense of love and care just because of their intrinsic goodness, we are one of those beings. So, if we continue to come back over and over to that refrain, then we're coming back to finding more gentleness with ourselves. And yeah, such a beautiful implication. This term is a bit fraught in contemporary psychological circles and popular psychology of self-care. Some people have a recoiling, like self-care, like really, like I have time for that. Or self-care as in some sort of fantasy that we can just take care of ourselves and we'll be okay, when the reality is we have a collective nervous system. Each of us are connected deeply to one another in this world. But what this book proposes is we indeed have to work so hard to stabilize our own mind and reveal the beauty of our own heart in order to be that for others. So we don't get stuck in the kind of self-orientation, but we really do recognize that, of course, we can actually offer compassion to others without having it. I'm sure all of you have done that at some point. And sometimes it comes easier for many of us to be compassionate and caring towards others. But if it isn't firmly rooted here, we burn out, right? We get exhausted, we get overwhelmed. Trying to love others without actually having that anchor here, it really is it's not sustainable. So a lot of the work in this text and these instructions for becoming a warrior of compassion in the world is, get clear and get right in your own heart and in your own mind. And the next chapter we're moving on to, I think it's probably the most cited chapter in the book, maybe the most famous chapter in the book, because it's one that deals with anger. Favorite topic here on Wednesday nights. Enjoyable to talk about anger, largely because it's such an obstacle to connecting with the heart. It can become such a barrier to our sense of compassion. Because usually with the force of anger, there's blame. There's a collapsing of another person into a wrong person, and our ability to care about them or see things a different way is just eliminated. So the goal of the Bodhisattva, the goal of this book in the training of becoming a compassion warrior, is to have not only compassion for people who are explicitly suffering, but to have compassion for everyone. Very easy for us to have compassion for people we care about when they're going through difficulty, transitions, loss, change. But what if that same kind of compassion could be extended kind of one circle out, someone you don't know but is having a similar difficulty? And then even one circle beyond that of someone you don't even think you would like, and just how we can continue to break down any barriers of our compassion. That's the real goal. And one of the ways that we can get caught up and struggle to feel compassion towards others is because we're super angry at them. We blame them. We feel frustrated. And this actually, of course, can be with our close other people. When someone you love suddenly becomes someone you can't understand, and you're like, why would you do that? How could you do that? And our anger blocks our care for them. And in the way that Shanti Deva, and then the secondary commentary here by Pema Chödrön, the way she talks about working with anger, it's really helpful and really simple and really hard. The main kind of goal with working with anger is cultivating a practice of just profound patience. It's about the unsexiest thing I could say as a intervention technique, right? Oh, patience. That sounds great. And it does harken back a little to, 2 chapters ago. There's a lot of kind of cycling themes in the book of when we feel overwhelming emotions, be like wood, right? Be like a log. And there's a kind of element in that, especially when the translation is be like a tree, rooted, grounded in the earth, is can we actually expand and extend our understanding of time? So later in the chapter, we get into how the way we think about our anger can help us transform our anger. But just at the basic level, anger has such a hot urgency, right? Whether it's frustration or irritation or full-blown rage. And it's right now, and we feel like we gotta do something about it. And so the simplest move, like the simplest thing, if nothing else you remember from tonight, is what is it like to take like just that bigger view, that longer term, longer time scale view. That's in some ways what allows like patience. And one other way to think about patience is to think about equanimity and the view in which we can allow the space for many truths and realities to exist at the same time. So that patience being like, I'm pretty angry at this person who's doing harm in the world, for example. And we think we know really clearly what's happening. And we do in this moment. But what we don't know is what's happened in the decades or years before, and what will happen in the decades and years to come. So there's this profound humility, this view of equanimity and patience. Like, I don't know. It doesn't mean we allow or say it's okay when there's harm. But one of the keys about anger to really understand is it robs us of peace of mind. Like it completely, rips out the possibility of rest. When we let anger fester, when we let anger become habit, when we wake up to anger, we go to sleep with anger, we're just always frustrated. There's no way that we can cultivate a stable mind. And so finding a way to hold anger, it's almost like how many layers of material do you need to put on your hand to hold a hot coal so it doesn't burn. And so for our practice tonight, we'll do a practice and then a little discussion and reading of these beautiful stanzas. For our practice tonight, I wanted to give a little preamble to see if we could invite working with this quality of frustration or anger that's likely already here with some of us. Maybe it will take a moment to consider, is there something in which you feel like there's a frustration you're holding on to? And it could be useful to hear a couple examples. I did not even notice that amazing being. Talk about lack of mindfulness. Who's this so cute? Who's this? Wolf? Wow. Friends at home, there's a really beautiful dog. That is a companion here for Jorge that I didn't see before. Oh my gosh. I see that at home, maybe Coco's at home. Is that what's going on tonight? Okay. The usual Dharma dog. The usual Dharma dog is not here, so that's good. Coco has her own space. Okay, good. So yeah, I thought it'd be good for us, and as we try to make space to hold with many layers of care and love, some of this frustration, some of these embers, to think about, what are the kinds of frustrations that are arising for us? There are many. I think there can be one around frustrated that it feels the work to support or protect our climate is in great jeopardy. There could be sadness, that would be very reasonable, but there can also be like real anger and frustration, persistent, depending on our orientation. Other examples that folks could think of, something they'd like to kind of work with or hold in a more loving way, some area of frustration. And keeping it, high level. We don't need to get too deeply into the specifics here to understand the meaning of what's going on. Mace?
The particular one that I'm working with right now is the supposed change in immigration ICE procedures that make schools, hospitals, and churches no longer sanctuary spaces.
Yeah.
So like we had done all this work in our school district to prepare for this, and now we're starting over.
Starting over.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think,
Super mad,
yes, good.
like really pissed.
Yeah. 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 There, yeah.
So usually my other half and I are very connected, but lately he has used some term around, well, it's not really the demise of democracy. And I won't get into details aside from reading that Melania Trump just signed a deal with Amazon for a $40 million documentary. Documentary. I'll just leave it at that, because so it's frustration, a little bit of irk.
Yeah.
It's not yet anger,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
And it's very close to home,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And I think, what's interesting is the term anger, especially in the way I use it from my background in psychological science, is the whole family of anger emotions, ranging from impatience, irritation, all the way up, right? It's encompassing. So there's, and we can have a actually pretty high level of low intensity anger. I mean, we can be really annoyed, right? But we can only be extremely rageful. There's no like, I'm a little raged, right? So, and I think the language is very helpful. Language is helpful in general. When we identify emotion, it gives us a pause and a moment to hold it, to see it. And it's also helpful for us, like when we have a vocabulary to understand ourselves, we can then also share that experience meaningfully. Yeah, anyone else have an example? Anyone struggling? Like, I'm not sure I have an example because I want your life. Just kidding.
I've been very aware of my impatience in hearing you talking about like everything that I'm doing being for the good of all beings. And I've been very aware of how I'm not doing that when I'm impatient, especially in traffic. I'm sure no one else can relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like, what would it be like to navigate through traffic with that in mind?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting too to get, one of the things Pema Chödrön and Shanti Deva points out is like there's this very simple idea that, anger is really catalyzed by getting something we don't want or not getting what we do want, which is like a very simple, it's like with traffic, I'm not getting what I want. Can I be with that? And even if I'm not benefiting beings, can I like reduce a little harm? Yeah. Thank you. So do folks have a sense, and when we do these practices of kind of sitting with or making space for difficult emotions, it's very helpful to have a specific example instead of in general. The specific example kind of helps us to anchor and work with one instead of maybe getting flooded by an overwhelming sense of like this example or that example or too many things at once. Oh, I saw 3 hands. Yep. Lucy's, then Kimberly. Kimberly's closer first, maybe.
What was the question again?
Do you have an example?
Of
Is
being angry?
and especially something where it's like not just, oh, I was frustrated that they ran out of my favorite coffee brew today, but there's something that's like, because here's the truth about some of our difficult emotions is it's not necessarily that we like them, but there's something compelling, right? And so not just those ones that come and go, but those ones where we're like, "Argh," like it just keeps us in that loop. Yeah, and then we listen.
So I'm having a difficult emotion with, we have a family member that's in hospice and end of life. And this person didn't want to struggle, and I keep having this emotion, or just the thought that I want them to leave, and I feel really bad saying that. I feel guilty because I very well know that the body's going to go when it has to go, right? And unfortunately, sometimes the body can stick around
Yeah.
for a long time without water and without food. And you don't want, you never want to see someone go through that. And
Yeah.
and so I feel this, I have these thoughts, and I feel really, really bad. And so I've been having kind of like that challenge of like, oh, I can't say this,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's really, tender to get to that place where like anger and sadness are very connected, right? Not always, but very often, anger is a way to give us more energy than to just sit with the sadness that might arise when we recognize I have no control. I can't do anything. So we're like, and I think just what we'll do in the sit is to kind of move back from the story of it to the felt sense of it and to the simple essence. Like of last week, we were working with fear in a similar way. And with fear, there's like this contraction. And what's interesting about anger is it's aggression. It's and so to just like notice that subtle essence of it and keep making room, keep making room. And in some ways, surrendering to feels like at the basement of many of our emotions when we let ourselves really surrender, and not the temporary ones, but those kind of persistent ones, is to be able to sit and be with the distress of deep sorrow, that kind of also is an essential ingredient of being here and being on this ever-changing planet and all the conditions of our life that are impermanent and changing. So that's strangely, finding that comfort and that stability in that base understanding of loss and change. Right? That's sometimes the insight that we can find in looking deeper and deeper and deeper into these difficult emotions. So, sounds like a real party, huh? You guys ready? I mean, better than just sitting with it. Like, let's work with it. So let's find a posture, feel supportive, and give ourselves a moment to really settle into the body by rolling our shoulders up to our ears. And then exhale, letting them down the back. And twice more, inhaling up to our ears. And exhaling down the back. And one more time. Giving yourself a moment to settle into the body. Feel into what the body wants. Does the body want to move a little forward or backwards? Where does it feel easeful on the shoulders and the neck to place the hands? And connecting to the softness in the face and seeing whether the eyes want to be partially open or closed. And as the bell rings, allowing our attention and awareness to really fully descend into the body. For a couple moments, just allowing ourselves to feel the entire field of the body. What are all these tactile sensations in the body? With the mindfulness of the body, we are tethering that wild elephant of the mind to one task, one simple job, noticing and feeling sensations within the body. With this simple noticing of sensations in the body, we don't need to change anything. We don't have to force something that feels tight to relax. We don't have to wait to slightly shift if there's pain. We are just calibrating, refining, making more clear and precise this seeing, feeling, and knowing of the body. And to help settle the mind a bit, we can add in this close following of the breath. So still aware of the body and sensations in the body, but focusing on the subtle sensations when the breath travels in through the nostrils, and when the breath travels out, back through the nostrils. Maybe you notice some sensation around the nostrils themselves or on the top of the lip. Maybe you just imagine and sense into the quality of air traveling in a bit cooler. traveling out warmed by having been in our body. The mind, that wild elephant, for sure will wander. See how kindly you can bring your attention back without reprimand or recrimination, just returning, coming back to the breath, feeling the subtle sensation of breath at the nostrils. And as you notice the breath, we can apply even a bit more refinement, helping us feel the qualities of ease, but also brightness and vividness. So for the next couple breaths, as we breathe in, imagining breathing in a sense of vibrancy and vividness all the way up the spine. And as we exhale and breathe out, releasing, relaxing. Now that we've settled a bit into the body and the breath, this is where we take a moment and consider that aspiration or intention of our practice. For the purposes of this evening, the aspiration and intention is this awakening heart. These beautiful lines from the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, which invite us to consider the possibility of waking up our own heart so that all beings can be free. Or an intention and aspiration can also feel more personal. On that great path to becoming more and more available and loving, what is needed right now. So an aspiration or intention could be community, ease, belonging. Taking a moment to infuse our practice with that kind of clear seeing. What are we here for? What do we want to strengthen and support? Now shifting attention and awareness away from intention, which can just gently recede into the background. And we take a moment with our mind and imagination to bring forth something that we're carrying, something like frustration or irritation, maybe even really feeling mad. And for just a moment, we can engage with the story of it. Who's involved? What are the implications? And then as soon as we can start to get the tactile sense, as soon as we feel that frustration or irritation in the body, we let go of the story. And we gently welcome and make space for whatever is these sensations that are associated with our experience. Sitting with just that raw sensorial experience. No story, no judgment. This pure awareness of the sensations of the emotion in the body. If at any time the sensations feel too strong or unpleasant, you can shift attention to the belly and breathe. Otherwise, we practice this experiment, noticing how the sensations shift and change, being very kind with the discomfort of these sensations in the body. Feel or imagine that you can make space around whatever you're feeling. If it's tight in the gut or in the heart, can you invite space around these areas? Notice the temperature, notice the quality of sensations. Notice if the mind wants to keep engaging with the story or maybe get distracted and push away. And for just a bit longer, being with these raw sensations just as they are. Softening the face, and softening the belly, softening the heart. And continuing to hold forth with this spacious awareness. Holding whatever are the qualities and sensations of this emotion. However we might be feeling the irritation or frustration in the body. And very gently imagine kind of making even more space, and that there's a possibility that the space around these sensations feels warm and kind. Can we hold or host these sensations from a place of warmth and kindness? Maybe noticing if the sensations start to shift or change or even dissipate, especially if we're not re-engaging with the story. Just a couple more moments here. Every time regathering our attention to the body, to the sensations and the space around the sensations. And feeling more and more that sense of loving presence. A loving presence which doesn't have a judgment or preference about where these feelings came from or what to do with them. With the next couple breaths, releasing the remaining remnants of whatever sensations arose from touching into anger. Releasing with each exhale, not the story itself, just the sensations. And then finding the simplest presence of loving awareness. Just being here with a loving heart and mind. No goal, no agenda, no anchor. If it's hard to feel that sense of loving awareness, you could imagine what it might feel like if the presence of loving awareness was right here. Thank you for your practice. So when we get to gather here together at the Dharma Collective and practice together, we also have this beautiful opportunity to create and cultivate community. And in order to do so, we have to have a lot of intentionality around our communication and our listening. So before we reflect a bit together, just taking a moment and really feeling and sensing like the sacredness of being here together, the preciousness, and kind of the delicateness. We can really, when we move towards being open-hearted, as we do in practice and we do in talking about these themes, we can really feel quite sensitive and how important it is to have a sense of the deepest compassion and non-harming in our speech, in our listening, with one another, with ourselves. So my request, almost a demand, is for radical compassion with one another here this evening, both here and online. How's that sound, everybody? All right, great. So curious from folks if there's any questions or reflections on working with anger in that kind of embodied way, and to really honor the source of these teachings. Many of you know, but Tsoknyi Rinpoche, it's a beautiful teacher, does this practice called the handshake with emotion. And that's very much imprint or blueprint of what I'm guiding you all through. And moving away from the conceptual idea of emotion to the somatic presence, and then a sense of more loving presence. And he calls our basic nature of loving presence, he calls it essence love. Really beautiful term. So moving towards that essence love. Yeah, any reflections, questions on that? Oh yeah. Great to have you back. Let's hear.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I won't take too long, but thank you for that. I really enjoyed that, and it was nice being with everyone again. I haven't been around a big group of people, and I could feel it again, what a difference it makes
Yeah.
in the practice. And I was really grateful for that. And I was grateful for the invitation for space with the anger in the body, because I was able to drop the story, which was nice, and I could really feel this like tightness in my chest
Yeah. And the
and throat.
yeah.
And so it was really nice just to kind of breathe space into that, and it was helpful.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
felt better.
Yeah.
And I too have been having trouble thinking of others first in a loving awareness way. And so it was kind of hard to touch the loving awareness, but I've been doing chin raising most recently, which I haven't done in Om Mani Padme Hum,
Yeah.
for about 2 weeks. And that really came forth, and I was able to kind of feel it through that.
Beautiful.
So.
You mean as part of the intention or in the resting phase?
In the resting.
Yeah.
And I also really appreciate how you take your time with setting the intention.
Yeah.
I can rush into that really quick to like, this is the first thing you have to do,
Yeah.
and then, so it was nice to sit for a while and have it really be way more embodied and
Yeah.
less in my head. So.
Beautiful. And I have a question if you're willing. With
Yeah.
the anger, sometimes I feel like the throat is often unexpressed anger.
Okay.
And just curious if that,
Yeah, I mean, yes. It was, because it was two situations arose, and I kind of got through the first one, but another one cropped in and popped its head up.
Sometimes
And I
they
was
do.
like, oh yeah, I'm actually a little frustrated with that thing. And I sidestepped it and just was like, oh, I'm not going to make it a thing.
yeah.
And then I was really like, well, I actually kind of feel good going into the thing.
Yeah. And I think,
And
yeah.
maybe I should have said something, but
Right.
So
And I'm
that's
so
where I
glad
was
you bring it up, because I think often we're like, oh yeah, anger when I, am expressing. But there's a lot of anger that we're kind of like holding, and maybe it's not so explicit, so we're not even aware of it, but like we're absolutely like emanating it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not, very few of us effectively like fully suppress it. It's like that
yes,
in between.
I would not talk to the person
Right.
now, because
Yeah.
it's a really good friend, and she would know in a heartbeat.
Yes.
And I wouldn't be able to hide it anyway. So
Yeah.
I'm just totally avoiding it.
Yeah. Which I think is, non-harming, right? And an effort of non-harming. And it is, it's difficult, this holding the anger. And we'll get into it a little bit here, but especially this belief that we're right. It's tricky, but that's what really allows it. And, that unexpressed anger, I had he's said this many times in his writing and public speaking, but my dad was really anger expressive, right? And I know that that's really hard to be around. So I think I'm always like, I'm gonna always hold it in. but I've heard from my friends and loved ones. That's also not so great to be around. So I'm not like on some high ground because I don't have like an externally raged problem, right? And I think in this orientation to working to metabolize our frustration and anger in a healthy way, it's good to think of it not just the like outwardly, externally strong aspects, but also that like ruminative, passive aggressive quality. Who goes there? Yeah. Also really harmful. It's like people can feel it, like just again, it's like that. I like the term, I don't love the feeling, but I like the term like subtle aggression. But it's like this energy of like, I don't like it. So anyway, thanks. I hear some rumblings online. Is that an accident or an intention?
I forgot that I was unmuted. So,
Okay,
but
no problem.
yeah, so thank you. Good evening. Well, I guess my question is, how do you know when you have overcome the anger versus you are suppressing it?
It's a
And
really good question. Yeah.
yeah, so and so there are times when I used loving kindness affirmations, and so the people who I'm upset to, then my energy changes because the days when I practice the affirmations, I feel more loving, and then
Mm,
my energy changes. But that is not the majority of the time. So
mm,
the rest of the days when I don't practice, yeah, there, I'm sure there's a different energy coming out of me, which I
mm.
don't think is necessarily aggressive, but
Yeah.
it's different. So when those when when would you say you have created the space versus you are just suppressing the feeling?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. And, we can use practices like loving kindness to spiritually bypass our anger, right? And it actually is, in some ways, we're kind of repressing it. Um, so let's say, someone we love, we feel disrespected by, and we're frustrated at them, and we're just like, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering. But like we're not really like feeling it, but we're trying to like not feel negative, and we're actually in this like inner battle that's not in some ways, and that's why I like the handshake. You have to let like that natural sine wave of emotion come and go at the embodied level. Because if we keep thinking our way through our emotion, it's not going to really, really relax and resolve. And again, this is more from the psychological science of emotion. But our emotions, if we aren't re-triggering them, and maybe some of you experience this, like when you stop the story and you're in the body, they are just gonna dissipate naturally. We actually don't have to force or do anything. But it is when we get back into the thought about it. So I think when we, repress our anger, whether it's with loving kindness or through distraction or just like will, like I'm not going to be upset about this, we're often like perpetuating delusion too. We're not actually looking like, what on earth could I be angry about for this long? Which is again like that right-sized humility of, I don't want to give away too much that's happening later in the chapter, but this idea and recognition that there's so much we don't know about any situation that we're super angry about. And it's just so classic, this idea that the moment we become angry at someone, they become a less dimensional human. Like we're angry at them and they're just bad. And we don't see any other dimensions. They're just a bad person. And so to take in not just, I'm going to willfully suppress the sensations and thoughts of anger, which is hard to do. That suppression actually is, really like drains a lot of energy, and it doesn't see clearly. It's like a move to suppress, but it's not a move to transform. Because seeing clearly is, this will pass. There's so much more about this that I don't know. right? Really getting clear on the actual context. And it's really important to do some of that work. Very rarely can we do that in the moment. So suppression of anger is really good, or avoidance, as Cage was describing. Like if you're really angry at someone and you haven't done the work, that's great. Like make some space. Don't see them, right? Or if looking at the news makes you angry, like insane every time you do, then maybe don't look at the news for a minute, right? Work on the skillful means of suppression, avoidance, but then still find that time to really understand and see clearly anger as it is, anger for what it is, which means seeing clearly the impact on yourself and on others, and seeing like the delusion. Again, having a momentary experience of anger, natural, we all do it. That's part of, living in this world and with these human bodies, hearts and minds. But when we're holding on to anger, we are unnaturally perpetuating, right, that experience over time, and that needs to be seen through with our like clear wisdom mind. Yeah. Yes, please.
Well, AA has a phrase for this: fake it till you make it,
Yeah.
which is basically give it attention until it what do you call it, succumb. In other words, by reflecting on it off and on, you can see when it has changed and
Yeah.
when it has disappeared.
That's right. Yeah. It's a much more pithy and elegant way to say what I said in 3 paragraphs. I love that. Because we know, right? We can discern the anger is still here, right? It's sometimes we're like a little self-deception, like I'm good, we can talk, but we're still angry, but if we do pay close enough attention, it's especially that like tight pretending to not be anger, that can sometimes we can miss it. But if we start to learn and really understand the felt imprint in the body of frustration, we know before we pick up the phone or see someone, am I going to be able to show up without holding on to this, right? And yeah, that is, if we could teach that skill to every single human being, it'd be a really awesome world we'd be living in. Very different. Yeah.
Oh, last question.
Yeah.
What is that symbol above your head?
It's like a representation of a mandala in an arty way. It was intended to be non-denominational. So it is whatever you make of it. Yeah. Yes, Ulysses.
So just a reflection on sitting with that, with that guilt. I realized that what seemed like it transformed into anger. The anger of, it took me back to when my mom died. That one, angry because my mom died of COVID and I got sick too, and she was in LA. So one, anger because I couldn't be there. 2, anger because 3 of our kids are in healthcare and none of us could have done anything for them.
Yeah.
And then sitting with that anger, when you said something about wrapping it, giving it some space, with this family member, I realized that that anger is it's more of a profound sadness, and it's a sadness because I know what's going to happen, and also for the individual that's going to be left behind, because I saw it with my father, and so it's a sadness because it's like there's nothing you can say, and you feel helpless, and there's nothing you can do because this is life.
Yeah.
And it has to take its course.
Yeah.
And sometimes you want to interrupt or fast forward, but you can't. You just have to sit and watch.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think, when I was working as a medical social worker in the ER here at General, so often and so understandably, when there was a unexpected trauma, injury, death, the response was anger, not sadness. I mean, part of that is shock when it's when it's very fast. There's a like, no, this can't. But there is like, it's like this protection for the heart that doesn't want to lose and the heart that doesn't want to accept. Like, anger makes sense, like it doesn't over time help and work, but it's not like, oh, it's wrong to feel angry when you should feel sad. Like, it makes sense that we want to use some of our energy, and in some ways it props us up. And what I noticed especially with those family members, is the moment that they let the anger go, like there was just, it ran out of steam, just collapsing into the sadness, right? And anger has a very potent energy. And one of the things I love that Pema Chödrön highlights is His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, anger can be used very skillfully. It's used in many kind of social justice movements and many ways that we stand up to injustice, oppression, all sorts of adversity. Like, that anger can be a real motivating factor. That's different than ill will, and hatred. And he makes a very clear distinction. To be angry and want to kind of move through or change or transform or get free is different than like, and I want you to suffer and I hate you, you're wrong and bad. And so I think that's a really like an interesting distinction to understand with the power of anger, right, too. Yeah. Beautiful reflections. Any other questions or comments on the practice? Yes, please.
I have a thing that's been making me angry that keeps happening over and over. The person keeps doing the same kind of thing. And I'm finding it hard to zoom out far enough in time. Like if it's in one instance, right? You can zoom out far enough in time that it feels less big. But when it keeps happening, I'm struggling with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, the move often, or the instruction with anger, can be that large view of equanimity that gives you compassion for this other person who's causing harm. But sometimes when the harm is persistent and prevalent, the compassion has to go to us and not to them. And so it's not, again, we don't want to like hate them. We don't want to let our anger calcify, but in some ways there's like a luxury of being able to not feel angry. Angry can help us protect, right? There's a clear seeing energy with anger. And so there might be, an important utility of feeling it, but again, to not let it like boil the mind, right? To keep energizing it. And yeah, it's tricky, especially with people we don't get to choose, like we have to see, who do things that make us frustrated because they're causing harm or because they're being careless or disrespectful. Our greatest teachers, as Shanti Deva would say, they are hastening our enlightenment because they're showing us our areas. And it's just like how tender we can be with ourselves, I feel like, is really the way to approach. Because yeah, we can't obviously change people. And often there's situations and circumstances we don't get to control. So yeah, thank you. Okay. We all need a little more from here. Oof, these first two stanzas.
Are we on chapter 7 now?
Yep. Is that? It's funny, it doesn't have the chapter. Oh,
I know, but I count. Working with anger.
uh-huh. It says chapter 6.
But that's because it's about chapter 6 of the way of the Bodhisattva.
That's right. So here, this is the stanza, and then there's commentary. So the stanza is, good works gathered in 1,000 ages, such as deeds of generosity or offerings to the blissful ones, a single flash of anger shatters them. This is not, luckily, we're going to unpack this, but it's, I know our friend Tenzin Chilki, who taught here a couple weeks back, like that line just makes you feel like, why am I on a Buddhist path? Like if one moment of anger like undercuts all of my, the good that I'm accumulating, then I'm done. I'm dusted. There's no hope. Yet, it's actually the way that Pema Chödrön unpacks it, I think is really helpful. One is that, again, it's like this anger of ill will, or what she describes is the anger that we don't regret, that we actually justify. So this anger that we stubbornly hold on to for lifetimes. So it's like this unwillingness to examine that type of anger. And then what's interesting is these good works gathered in 1,000 ages, such as deeds of generosity. That sounds like the good work we're doing of generating merit and gathering virtue. But actually, what it describes is people who give kind of superficial offerings. So who show up at the temple and they offer flowers or they offer, some other goodness, but they're not from their heart actually doing the work of becoming a spiritual practitioner or a warrior of compassion. And so, offering in that way, it's good. It's nice to offer, but that can be undone by something like your unmetabolized anger. So the way I understand it is you can, engage in the spiritual materialism, right, of, offering and kind of doing, donating money and energy. But if you're not doing the work of becoming a practitioner, you're not going to get anywhere. And like this anger is going to like keep pulling you back because there's not enough you can do to kind of appease from the outside what you think are these offerings. And it's not common in our time, right? We don't have this, but if you've been to East Asia or other parts of the world where Buddhism is very alive and practiced in the monasteries, you will have like huge donations from like corporate entities, like they will send large flower wreaths, and then individuals during high holidays, they bring offerings, and it can be very transactional. It can be really, removed from actual spiritual intention or practice. So apparently, good works that can be so quickly destroyed are superficial acts of generosity. So the merit that's gained from virtuous acts that are just superficial or ritualistic can be destroyed by angry outbursts. So it sounds a lot worse than it is. But this idea that we can't just be generous at a superficial level and not work on our aggression. The second stanza here in this chapter is, no evil is there similar to anger, no austerity to be compared with patience. Steep yourself, therefore, in patience, in all ways, urgently, and with zeal. So you've probably never heard zeal and patience together. And this idea, again, looking at the real cost of anger, I think is one of the ways, this intentional use of the word, the evil of anger, like evil's kind of not a light word, a heavy word, but to recognize that this, even simple words that are said in anger in a close friendship can cause rupture and disturb trust for months, if not longer. And so to really recognize the harm of anger, to be very vigilant with the harm of anger. This isn't meant to shame all of us who unintentionally are passive aggressive and mad at people we love, right? These stanzas, they're like kind of trying to show us like the high, like hold yourself to this while doing the work down here. And that simple idea that there's the bodhicitta, or the awakened heart, that is what we can do every day, the small actions. And then there's the aspirational, this more absolute level of bodhicitta, in which we imagine ourselves able to not respond with anger, and to kind of hold that as part of our sacred vision, or part of our understanding of how we could move through the world. So no evil is there similar to anger, no austerity to be compared with patience. Steep yourself, therefore, in patience, in all ways, urgently, with zeal. I mean, I mentioned last week my dad had a particularly lucid morning, and in our visit he was saying, "I've recognized I'm an impatient person." I was like, sweet, 90 years old, got this. And he's like, and it's because I don't have a healthy relationship with time. And I just keep thinking about it, oh yeah, this perverse relationship with time that many of us operate in a capitalist system makes us impatient as fuck, right? It's like, next thing, I got more things to do. And there is an energy of impatience, that it is, impatience literally is a synonym for feeling angry. So this lack of patience is this feeling of being blocked in our progress, this frustration. And so the healing power of patience also means healing our relationship to the reality of the time that we live in. And that's why with patience, part of it is also that seeing clearly, right? There's only so many things you can get done in a day. There's only so much we can ask of ourselves. Because when I think of impatience, the number one thing I'm impatient about, me, right? I direct a lot of that towards myself. And, this anger that we direct towards ourselves, of course it's harmful because it doesn't feel good. But just like, so many other of our emotions, we become totally self-absorbed. It's like, oh, I can't believe I did that. What's wrong? We're just in this soup of self-absorption about, the deficiency, not how great I am, that kind of self-absorbed. But yeah, and it's really often based in an unrealistic, super undimensional view of ourselves too. Not seeing all the ways that we succeed, all the ways that we, are in alignment with our values and feel good about how we're moving through the world. So she says, anger can be motivated by compassion, but hatred is always accompanied by ill will. Nevertheless, at times we may find ourselves consumed by hatred. And to work with these times, Shanti Deva introduces us this austerity of patience. It indicates that what we need to go through when we refrain from escalating. It takes courage. So this patience, there's this word used throughout the book, klesha, or our difficult, disturbing emotions, right? And what happens before the klesha is the shenpa. I don't know why, I love that term. Shenpa is, it's that first seed of discomfort when a difficult emotion arises. She sometimes calls it the itch, right? And don't scratch it, don't succumb to that, desire to just inflame it into a klesha. And that's that austerity of patience is, ooh, I'm kind of mad right now, or I could feel what my righteous indignation rising, and I'm just gonna sit with the discomfort. And it does, it feels like your skin is too tight. It's a hard feeling to be with. And there's a wonderful writer, neurobiologist, some of you may know, Daniel Siegel, and he really very clearly popularizes ideas about the brain and about experience that I think are quite helpful and useful. And one is this idea of our window of tolerance, our ability to be with distress, and how essential it is to develop a greater window of tolerance or distress tolerance with this world. Because it's uncomfortable, it's itchy. Right? There's all sorts of things that kind of get under our skin. And if we immediately feel like we gotta do something about it, we are like constantly caught up in our kleshas, caught up in these disturbing emotions. And so this patience is really like that training in tolerating our distress. And doing the handshake practice, I think, is a great distress tolerance training, because we're like, all right, this doesn't feel very good. Like I'm sitting with anger or fear or sadness, but I'm just making space and making space and making space. And, the patience of that and allowing it as much time as it needs. Because sometimes with these practices, we have like a little bit of a covert agenda. Like I'm willing to sit with my anger if it's willing to go away soon. And this no agenda, like that's patience, and it's very loving. You think about someone who's patient with you, that's really kind. It's really generous. And if someone, if we can be patient with another, I got to spend time with my godson this weekend, and man, I love him, and he's so annoying. He's 5, right? Like just really annoying, poking stuff, pulling stuff, right? And that like patience that's coming from this place of deep care, and without an expectation that he's not going to be an annoying 5-year-old, So it's that level of kind of, you could call sacred vision or bigger vision that helps us with the everyday discomforts and difficulties. That's like the training in patience. And it's interesting too, because I think we could, part of training in patience could be, how do we not occupy every second with new material? Like I was in line the other day and I didn't pull out my phone, and I was like, whoa, this is novel. And like giving yourself like space and break between things is also incredible quality of patience, because there's such a unique intertwining between our ability to sustain attention, as we do in all of our shamatha practices, all of our attention practices, and being able to be patient, right? Patience actually requires that we don't redirect our attention somewhere else often. We're kind of like, I know this is hard and I'm here with it and I'm here for it. I want to read just one last one for tonight. Those tormented by the pain of anger will never know tranquility of mind. Strangers they will be to every pleasure. Sleep departs them, they can never rest. So just to like really land this idea of the cost and the pain of anger for us. Those tormented by the pain of anger will never know tranquility of mind. And so if, your intention, one of my most kind of beloved intentions in my practice is peace of mind. I would love more peace of mind. And I know that because I love peace of mind, I can't energize my anger. They're like diametrically opposed. And he says, she says, Pema, when we're angry about something, most of us think about it feverishly. We can't sleep, we can't find peace of mind. And, she says, which is great, the first thing you do is get in touch with anger in the body. She describes a meditation much like the one we did. And this other instruction she gives, another instruction she says she's found helpful, is to stay with your soft spot. Below the anger is enormous tenderness, which most of us quickly cover up with the hardness of rage. Learning to touch that vulnerability isn't easy, but it keeps you from exploding and destroying everything in sight. And this is such a classic Pema-ism, this stay with the soft spot. This idea that a lot of the ways that we find ourselves struggling against, difficult emotions, difficult experiences, is that hardening. And that there is this soft spot of the heart. And then we can kind of keep going back there, and finding that tenderness and finding that tenderness. So I love her instruction there. We will continue with anger next week. I did want to, I think most folks know here, but I'm going on retreat, silent retreat for the month of February. So I will not be here. We will have Nicole Chase, who some of you know is a beautiful teacher and really weaves in mindfulness with music and sound, and so kind of offers a really beautiful way of being in the practice through different senses. And she's going to do a 4-week series while I'm gone, which I'm very grateful for. And I will really miss being here. I'll be here next week too, but just in case I don't see some of you, where I will be thinking of you all and certainly counting the minutes to when I get to talk again. So let's take a moment and come back to the body and the breath. And see if we can find that little sense of a soft spot, some tenderness of the heart. And being here in open-hearted community and with the teachings, sometimes we get to feel a little of that tenderness more available, closer to the surface. And we reconnect with that beautiful aspiration of bodhicitta, and considering that our time here together is an energy, it's a resource. And in that beautiful aspiration of thinking of others, we will symbolically offer this energy up. And so if it feels natural and comfortable, placing hands together in front of the heart. And imagine offering this energy. And I'll share the lines from the Guide to the Bodhisattva, this dedication. As long as space remains, so too shall I remain, to alleviate the suffering of the world. May I be a bridge for those who need landfall, a lamp for those who need light. For those who are sick, may I be medicine and doctor. Dedicating all of our accumulated resource and energy here tonight, that each and every being could feel love and belonging, feel free from inner and outer harm, that each and every being could be perfectly free. Such a refuge to be with you all. Really, really grateful.